Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Would like to welcome welcome everyone, inshallah, to this live transmission on YouTube. Today we have two special guests with us. We have Dr. Musharraf Saab. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab.
Wa alaikum assalam, Maulana Hassan.
Dr. Saab, how are you? How are things?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Yes, good.
Yeah,
Yes.
mashallah.
I'm very excited about meeting Ayaz Sahib and talking to him, and you, of course, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. And our special guest today, mashallah, who is joining us from Pakistan is Ayaz Muhammad Khan Saab. Ayaz Saab, mashallah, he's a very a simple, a man with warm heart, but mashallah, he has a very stellar background. Ayaz Saab is a retired secretary to the government of Pakistan in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he represented Pakistan over 33 years in his role as an ambassador to places like Argentina, Moldova, Europe, and Egypt, where I had the excellent opportunity to actually meeting him. And as a retired diplomat, he has traveled extensively. He's learned languages when he's been to these different cultures, absorbed the cultures, the language, the habits. So a man of great culture and a great view in life. So Ayaz Saab, we would like to formally welcome you onto the program. And Janab, how are you? We understand that COVID-19 is the outbreak in Pakistan has been devastating in the last couple of days. So we pray that you and your family and everyone there as well.
We are all fine by the grace of Allah Almighty. Thank you very much. We are fine. We are okay.
Alhamdulillah. And we miss our days, Ayaz Saab, in Cairo, and you must have had lovely memories at your time that you spent in Egypt.
The biggest finding of my life is Hafiz Munir Ahmad Saab, Dr. Saab, because he became doctor in front of me.
MashaAllah.
Because when we met, I used to call Dr. Hafiz Saab, and then in front of us, he got the PhD degree, and then he started writing with his name, Dr. Hafiz Munir, and I said, I refused to call him doctor. I said, no, I still love you as Hafiz Munir Sahib, and I'll continue to call you Hafiz Munir Sahib.
MashaAllah.
Did that graciously, yes. Yeah.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair.
Wonderful memories of Cairo, certainly.
Yes. Alhamdulillah. No, Jazakallah, Ayaz, for joining us today and perhaps looking at those beautiful memories. Inshallah, so today we are going to look at Surah Yasin from the Majestic Quran. Before I start with Dr. Musharraf Saab, Ayaz Saab, I just wanted to ask you your experience with the Majestic Quran, if you had picked it up, have you read some portions of it, just some of your reflections before we start.
Certainly, yes. Of course, I did. Although I haven't been through the entire translation as yet, but I have had a glimpse, of various chapters, including from the beginning, when eminent scholars and personalities have mentioned, the way this glorious Quran, glorious Quran. I'm saying it because I was reading, about Muhammad Pickthall, so it has stuck to my mind. This translation certainly is a very, very important contribution to the English translations, existing these days, especially at a time when the new generation refuses to acknowledge the classical English. I was, in my experience, when I was teaching English during my master's days, in Pakistan, whenever we used to talk about Shakespeare or classical writers, of the English language, the students used to feel extremely difficult, to comprehend what these scholars or these writers, these poets, were writing about. They were yearning for simple language. And I myself, although by the grace of Almighty, I was able to comprehend, a bit of Muhammad Tall's translation, or Abdullah Yusuf Ali's translation for that matter. But when I went through some sections, of this translation, this particular translation that we are talking about of Dr. Musharraf Hussain, it's a wonderful, wonderful contribution, to the English language translation of the Holy Quran, because I think the time has come when the message of the Quran has to be put across to different communities, not only the Muslim readers, but but the non-Muslims, because during my experience, as a diplomat, when I used to come across various personalities, both eminent, or common personalities, from the different societies that I had a chance to live in, and we used to answer questions, concerning status of women in Islam, for instance, as diplomats. So I used to recommend them that they should go through first, the Holy Quran translation, in their language, respective languages. For instance, in Argentina, the Spanish language is spoken, and in the office, when I used to tell my Argentinian staff that they should have some idea about what Islam is, and they should, before forming their final opinion, they should first read the Holy Quran, and its translation. Similarly, in English-speaking societies, we used to recommend, different translations, but we were in search of one translation which could be comprehended, by a common man in English-speaking society. And I think Dr. Musharraf Hussain has made a great contribution by translating Holy Quran in plain, simple English, which I also enjoyed, as a student of literature, I enjoyed reading this Holy Quran, this
comprehended, by common man in English.
Okay, fantastic.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Jazakallah khair. And I would like to come back to that later on, Ayaz, in the program, because your extensive travels to Argentina and different parts, and how perhaps we can talk to Dr. Musharraf Saab, how can Quran actually be made accessible there? I mean, I think that is very important, but we'll inshallah touch upon that later on. Dr. Musharraf Saab, I would like to bring you on formally, and today we're discussing the heart of the Quran. And literally it's called the heart of the Quran. So can you and you've split the surah up in around 14 different topics, so I just want to perhaps allow you to introduce the surah. It's a very powerful surah. It's a surah that many of us have memorized, and we often recite on khatams and when we go to visit in the graveyard. So out of all the important, and I think perhaps this is another project for you, Dr. Musharraf Saab, to look at, because in a lot of in Pakistan in particular, you have this compilation of the most important surahs, Surah Waqi'ah, Surah Yasin. So it'd be interesting to have a majestic Quran translation, or perhaps of the 3-4 surahs just which are oft repeated, Surah Mulk, Surah Waqi'ah.
That's very good. I'll note that down. Yes, yes. Selected surahs, yes.
Yes, my mother has her own copy, and it's rather than going to the Quran, it's easy accessible. The few surahs which are repeated. Okay. So there you go, Dr. Saab. That's another good idea.
Alhamdulillah.
So we can introduce the surah to us, Jazakallah.
Yes. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me tell you a story. It's not too long ago that I was at a deathbed of my friend's mother. And she had just perhaps a few minutes or hour or so, and this was in a hospice. And I told them to put Surah Yasin as to be recited. Okay, so they had their I think it was I sent them Khalil Rahman Husri's tilawat, because Khalil Rahman Husri is one of the great reciters of the Quran, but he has this mode which is very hazeen, it's a sort of it's a sad kind of sorrowful, and it has that emotional feeling to it. So Surah Yasin was being read, and I was sitting there as well, along with the whole family around this dying person, and I was reflecting. Why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, read Surah Yasin when somebody is dying? Why? Well, remember, when a person is dying, certain parts of his brain are really very sharp then. Certainly spiritual elements, the spiritual side, his physical senses might be finishing. But with regards to the spiritual side of his being, it becomes very sharp. So sharp that, the Quran actually talks about how sharp people's eyes would be on the day of judgment. فَبُصَرِقَ الْيَوْمَ الْحَدِيدِ. They would have very, very sharp eyes on the day of. They will be able to see everything. There would be nothing hidden. They would be able to see. They would be able to read, as they say, under the line. Yeah, no, okay. There'll be no problems understanding what's behind this. So why Surah Yasin being read to this dying person? And remember, Surah Yasin mentions how Allah will resurrect the dead. How Allah will bring the dead back to life at least 7 times here. Not just mentions it, but in fact gives very powerful evidence for each time that, look, this is how we bring the dead to life. This is how we bring the dead to life. We will bring the dead to life. Now, this person is dying. Of course, death in normal understanding, materialistic understanding, without the faith understanding, means that's the end. As the Makkans used to say, نحن نحيي ونميت وما نحن بمبعوثين. We live, we die, and we won't be resurrected. That is the attitude. But here, this is a believing person whose spiritual faculties are now sharp, and she's being reminded 7 times, we're going to bring you back to life. We're going to give you new life. We're going to give you a great life. Can you see how it is uplifting for the dying person? But of course, it's only for that dying person who did used to read Surah Yasin, who knew what it meant, who knew when Allah says, وَآيَةُ اللَّهُمُ الْأَرْضُ الْمَيْتَ أَحْيَيْنَاهَا. So when they read that, one of the signs is that the dead earth, how we bring it back to life. So, and from Habba, from the seed, we bring life back. And we bring humanity from the sperm and so on. So really, it really is an amazing surah, to be honest, in terms of uplifting that dying person's final moments. Whereas normally, you would become very despairing and hopeless. But now, full of hope. Not once, but 7 times the Quran reminds you, gives you evidence for it. So, I think this is one of the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ said this is the heart of the Quran. Because once our faith in Day of Judgment becomes strong and we begin to look towards our akhirah and that becomes our destination, we are now going to be driven. We've got a reason. We've got a motivation. We've got a huge incentive actually to do good. So I think, that is the perspective and the background I think we should bear in mind with Surah Yasin.
MashaAllah. Ayaz, I just want to bring you in here about this concept of death, and especially with expat communities. And did you have any experiences when you went out to some of these countries and you had to deal with families who had gone through a bereavement, or maybe you had to send a body back to Pakistan, just how they were feeling, and the whole emotion, emotionally is very draining, even for you, perhaps dealing with all of this?
Not exactly that I was called to attend a funeral, something like that. But there was an incident, during my days in Cairo, which I still remember vividly. That I don't know. It may sound very childish, to some of you, but it has impacted me a lot, and I have drawn some conclusion out of that, and that is that once I was taking my children, my 2 daughters, who were suffering from fever, to Anglo-American hospital in Cairo, and there most of the doctors used to be Christians, and Coptic Christians. And Christian community was treated there in that particular hospital. I was waiting, outside for the results of the X-ray of my children, X-rays of my children. And during this time, an ambulance was brought in, and the doctors came rushing in towards the ambulance, and a very elderly lady was brought out, from the back of the ambulance outside. The doctors checked her right there. They didn't bother to take the old lady, inside the emergency ward. They checked her there, and what I heard was something very, very terrifying. She said, "No, Mish Auzaru, I don't want to come. I don't want to come." She was in the last throes of her death, and she was summoning all energies that she had, and she was saying, that I don't want to come, I don't want to come. And I visualized that probably, as mentioned in the Holy Quran, that we send malaika, to extract, their ruh from their jism, from their bodies, and they say, "Come on, give us, your life, give us your ruh, to us." So probably, that farishta, that angel was there, extracting the ruh from that lady, and she was shown, that what her final destination would be like. This has impacted me a great deal, and this drove me towards this particular activity, I would say, that whenever I used to come across in negotiations, with my counterparts as a diplomat, I always used to say in the end that you people must read the Holy Quran's translation, in your respective languages, but do go for something authentic. Don't go for airy-fairy, or something which is considered to be, a debris, or something like that. You should go for authentic translation and then form an opinion about the life here, and the life in the hereafter. I always used to tell my staff members, who were non-Muslims, that what do you think, what your life would be like, once you have passed away from this world? And they would say, well, it will end there, and the life stops there the moment we stop breathing, And I used to say, no, another life will await for you, which will be the life, forever. You will die only once, and you will be resurrected, and they would look at me in disbelief and would say, well, can you give us, can you recommend something as to... So again, coming back to Dr. Saab's, translation, I think it's a very, very good addition to the inventory, of the books, of the English translation, of the Holy Quran. And I'm certainly going to make use of it, as best as I can.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair. So, Dr. Saab, you just mentioned, and we've tied up nicely, that experience of death, and then reading Surah Yasin perhaps aids and allows some sort of ease for the believer when he is dying. And very nicely, you pointed out the 7 verses. I wanted to go into the story of the 3 messengers, Dr. Saab, which begins the narrative of the Surah Yasin. So perhaps you could touch upon that, Dr. Musharraf Saab.
Okay. Well, Surah Yasin, as I said to you, provides these. First, it gives those 7 very powerful arguments, proofs, effectively, for how Allah brings dead to life already. So He's challenging us. Look, how can you explain to us that the seed that is dead, we make it grow into a tree that becomes fruitful for hundreds of years and feeds thousands and thousands of animals and you? How can you deny that, we bring fire out of fresh twigs, where there is, which are full of water, okay? 80% is water, and yet out comes sparks, all right? So, and then about the human sperm and egg, this is how Allah brings out you out of it. Come, think. How do you account for that? How do you account for the solar orbits and all those wonderful stars and so on? And about the moon, very interesting thing about the moon is mentioned, how it wanes and waxes, okay? how it actually shrivels into kal urjunil qadim, like the dried leaf of the palm tree. Okay, it's an amazing sort of image of it, and so on. Those 7 powerful evidence for resurrection, but it also provides evidence for tawheed and for risala. And as you can see, these 3 are the fundamental beliefs of Islam. They're all intertwined, actually. One depends on the other, and so the evidence of risala is really interesting. You see, the Makkans were people who, first of all, they had this most weird idea that dead cannot be brought back to life. And I say weird because in the West, the Egyptians believed in life after death. The Persians in the East also believed in life after death. The Jews believed in it. The Christians believed in it. But the Arabs just couldn't get this. So Abu Jahl would bring these, dry bones, whitewashed bones to the Prophet ﷺ and say, "Are you telling us that these whitewashed bones can be brought back to life?" So they had this. So that was a real challenge, and this is why the Quran spends a lot of time. And one of the reasons was because they are materialists. And our age is also a materialist age. And this is why the Quran is so relevant. And it makes so much sense, to be honest, in modern age as well, because we live in a very materialist society as well. And so the Quran presents this spiritual side of life, spiritual side of human existence, and spiritual realm in itself, which is a dominion which is beyond the physical. No matter how sensitive our instruments of science become, no matter how wonderful our Hubble telescope becomes, and we can see billions and billions of miles away in the space, and we can see the minutest details. We can see the coronavirus and the proteins in it with the best electron microscope. But I'll tell you, we will never be able to see the spiritual realm because it is just beyond the physical anyway. So coming back to the idea of the 3 prophets, see the Arabs were, they had heard about the Jews, the Christians. In fact, there's evidence that there possibly were few Christians and Jews in Makkah as well. But more than that, the well-off Arabs who did the trading, or Makkans who did the trading, were coming into contact with Jews. They had heard about prophets. They had heard about Torah and Zabur and Injil. So there was some understanding of that as well amongst them. But amongst them were the Hanif, the Hunafa, people like Abu Bakr Siddiq and some others, who didn't believe in idolatry, who didn't believe in, but they were looking for a new religion, effectively. They were not satisfied with Judaism or Christianity, but wanted something. So this is why the Quran kept on talking first about the previous prophets, but also Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from amongst them, Jana. Okay, and the Quran says, "Qad ja'akum rasulun min anfusikum azizun alayhi ma antum." A prophet from amongst your own selves has come to you. Okay, who's Bashir and who's Nazir and so on. So this concept of prophethood was within their, something that they had in their grasp. And so here the Quran tells a very story of the 3 prophets. Who are these 3 prophets? Okay, really it's actually 2 prophets, and then the third one comes afterwards. Okay. And again, the Quran doesn't give us where they were, when they were, who they were. It doesn't tell us any of those things. Okay, it just tells us how they preached, but they were rejected by their people, and that is the real crux of it, the rejection. As though the Quran is saying, well, okay, the Makkans are going to be are rejecting you, Ya Rasulullah. Okay, they're rejecting you. So did they reject 3 prophets? This community. What happened? What was their fate? Where did they end? And of course, the Quran then tells the story of that man who ja'a min aqsal madinati rajulun yas'a qala ya qawmi ittabi'ul mursalin. Who comes from the far end of the town and says to them, "What's the matter with you people? Why don't you listen to these prophets? They're telling the truth." Okay, of course they kill him, and he goes to paradise. And the Quran, takes us. It's interesting. It doesn't tell us they martyred him or anything. This is again, the Quran is very good at compressing things into, from present to the future. It's just amazing style it has. So it compresses the present into the future. So it goes into the future. It takes us into the future where this man is talking and he says to his people, how he regrets. What if, you just don't know where I am. I'm in paradise. You are going to miss this. You are going to go to hell if you don't. So the Quran now talks from that angle. So it's challenging the Makkans, really. The whole story is about challenging the Makkans and also building the confidence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba. Okay, look, don't worry. 3 prophets were rejected. You just won, okay? And just like that one person who supported the Prophet, this band of wonderful Bilal and Abu Bakr and Umar and Hamza and Yasser and Sumayya, you're going to be successful. So that's the story. That is the really background to it, to be honest. Yes.
SubhanAllah. Jazakallah khair for that. And one of the beautiful verses from that messenger that you spoke, that when he dies, when they ask him, قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين, that I really entered into paradise is because of the compassion of my Lord who had forgiven me, not because I deserved it. I mean, we don't,
Yes.
We're very finite beings, and doing a few good actions shouldn't result into infinite bliss, but this is the mercy of our Lord.
Yes.
وَجَعَلَنِي مِنَ الْمُكْرَمِينَ, and he has made us from these noble people and noble character. And Ayaz, I just want to bring you slightly into this concept of ikram or mukrameen, being noble, because when you ask the general masses about nobility and politicians, I think they would think that these are two opposites. So in your own extensive career, how were you able to keep up your akhlaq and this kind of nobility that comes with our faith whilst dealing with politics and ambassadors and very important people? How were you able to manage all that?
Well, we during our entire career, we used to come across, we used to deal with politicians, obviously, and diplomats,
Of course.
and certainly, it was, each occasion was an experience in itself. It was adding to our knowledge and information, but the thing is that, as Dr. Saab was saying, that it was the nobility, or the ayan of societies who used to reject, we are talking about the Malay, like in the Holy Quran, it is mentioned, that when Musa alayhi salam goes to Pharaoh, and he is surrounded by his chosen ones, and they are the ones, first to reject the faith, the call to faith. And this is exactly what happens, that when you are telling something, not just the message of the Quran or message of Islam, I wasn't a preacher, of course, certainly not preaching on every occasion, but whenever we had a chance to talk about Islam and Islamic society, Pakistani society, we always faced tremendous opposition, from the noble ones, the high-ups, of the society, whereas a common man in those societies was much more humble, and was prone to listen to us, give us a compassionate hearing, and was even ready to probe more deeper, into what we were saying, on his or her own. But the Malay, of the societies, they were headstrong, they were rigid, in their attitude, and they outrightly used to reject, whatever proposals, we used to put on the table.
Maulana, it's really interesting, Brother Hussain. It's really good to read the brave man is martyred and taken to the paradise. I just like to, this is
of course.
So So Allah says, enter the garden of paradise, he was told. If only my people knew, he said, the extent to which my Lord has forgiven me and placed me among the honorable. Now that's the Mukrameen. Mukrameen, of course, people of Jannah here. Thereafter, we didn't send any army against his people from the sky. We don't do that. This is really assurance to the Meccans as well. Look, we're not going to punish you like this. We don't do this. And this is really important thing to remember. Some people are now saying, oh, this pandemic is Allah's punishment to humanity, and Allah is, killing these people because of, and that's a very wrong way of looking at it, because what proof have you got that this is a pandemic? This is from Allah. Okay, you really have no proof. And what we know, this is Sunnatullah. This is one of the divine laws of Allah that has been broken by the human beings, and as a consequence, we are tasting the fruit of our own labors. Effectively, it's really interesting that Professor Jane Goodall, one of the world's expert person on animal behavior, she said something to this effect that this pandemic is of course something that we have wrote with our own hands. We are the authors of this. And of course we are. There's no doubt about it. Why would anybody want to eat bats from the far off caves of Wuhan, Jana, for example? Why do you need to do that? Well, if you do, well, this is the consequence of it. And then, the way we travel, within 12 hours, you're from Wuhan to New York. Okay. Within 6 hours, you're from Wuhan to Karachi and Islamabad. Okay. So, these are the consequences of our own doings, really. Anyway, so, Allah is really, it's really wrong to think that Allah would be just slapping us on the face like this, Jan. I don't think that is not the way of Allah. Allah has his own sunnah, which his divine plans. Anyway, just one blast, okay? Sayhatun wahida, sayhatun, just single blast. That's all it was. And there they were lying dead. What a shame. Whenever a messenger came to a community, they mocked him. Haven't they seen how many generations we destroyed before them? None will come back to them. Yet they will be presented before us. Now, this is really interesting. Meccans were very familiar with what had happened to the people of Ad, the people of Samud. They actually used to go past their ruins in Petra city. Yeah. They were also aware of what had happened to the people of Ika and people of Sabah. They were well aware of the city of Iram, which actually was recently discovered. But so, they were aware of these things. So Allah says, well, these are realities of the past. Yes.
SubhanAllah. Dr. Saab, one of the things I really enjoyed about the surah is the chapter on the orbits of the sun and the moon. And I just want to read it out to you because, of course, you've got a science background. And I just want to, if you can perhaps tease this aspect of science out from here. So it's the ayahs from ayah number 37. وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ اللَّيْلُ نَسْلَخُ مِنْهُ النَّهَارَ فَإِذَا هُمْ مُظْلِمُونَ وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍّ لَهَا. Another the orbits of the sun and the moon, the sailing of ship. Another sign for them is the night from which we gradually peel the daylight away, and they are in pitch darkness. The sun travels in its orbit and is precisely determined by the Allah Almighty. Similarly, the moon, we determine its phases from full moon to crescent, that is slim as a dry date stalk. The sun can't overtake the moon, nor the night outpace the day. All are floating in their fixed orbits. Now, could you just bring what modern science has to say with that, and how you can link the Quran with our understanding of the universe?
This passage is a very accurate description of the solar system and, of course, what happens in our solar system, and particularly with the different phases of the moon. And what it calls it is ذَلِكَ تَقْدِيرُ الْعَزِيزِ الْعَلِيمِ. That is the taqdeer of the Almighty, the Wise. Now, what is taqdeer? Taqdeer, qaddara yuqaddiru taqdeeran, Maulana, it means to measure, determine, absolute precise measurement. So, today here in Nottingham, the sun will set at 9:28. And on 8th of June 2019, it set at exactly 9:28. And in 1720, it set at the same time. And 2,000 years from now, it will set at that time. That is the precision, the accuracy, with which the sun orbits, the moon orbits. And this is why, we're able to actually calculate the birth of the moon, 29 days, 12 hours, 48 minutes, and 5 seconds. We can, so precise, the conjunction of the moon. It is just amazing. And that is taqdeer. It's precise measurement, determination. And how Allah has done, and this is a very precise description of the of our solar system, and how this idea of naslahu minhun nahar, how we peel the daylight. And when you're traveling on the plane nowadays, sometimes they show you the phases of day and night, don't they? And you can actually see the earth getting darker, just like as though you're peeling the skin of your orange, okay? As you pull it back, and so it's an amazing, I think that's again, the one would say, where would the Meccans know this? First of all, they didn't have the language, the Meccans, we talk a lot about the Meccans. Arabic was wonderful and they were great poets. Yes, of course they were poets, but how many prose did they write? You can't find a single prose. They couldn't write like this, this, and then so accurately describe the phases of the moon, the stars, and that is something beyond the description of the Arabs, and also the accuracy of the science in it. Subhanallah, I mean, this is really an amazing. Again, it's about how this idea of the day, and the night. One is dark and the other is bright. Okay, one is pitch dark, the other is bright. Okay, two opposites. How Allah controls this. So it's again another proof of Allah being able to bring the dead to life as well. Okay, so another powerful evidence for that.
And Ayaz, mashallah, when we're talking about how the world rotates, and mashallah, you've done a lot of traveling. So just almost a year ago, you were perhaps in Argentina and Buenos Aires. I'd just like to, for me, one part of the world I haven't seen is South America. I mean, I think it's very fascinating, the culture and the people there. I know in Argentina, there was an early migration of Lebanese Muslims, and I think around the 1940s. And it's very interesting, the Muslim community in South America. Dr. Musharraf Saab, if you remember the Imam of Masjid al Hussain, who came back many years ago. I think he came to Nottingham as well. He went to Argentina for a few months to speak to the Muslims.
Yes,
So South America is very interesting, and I've been recently reading about World War II, the Nazi Holocaust, and it's very interesting how a lot of these Nazi generals managed to escape and actually ended up in South America. It's a continent that pretty much speaks Spanish. It's very new to Islam, I think. So what kind of firstly, your experience of that, and your perhaps recommendations to Dr. Musharraf Saab about translating into, is it worthwhile translating into Spanish, something which is spoken in the continent, and how do the people there engage with Islam, especially for the Muslims and the sources out there?
Well, there are, for example, in Buenos Aires itself, there's a large institution, which has a mosque also built by the Saudis. It is funded by Saudis. It is managed by Saudi government. An imam is appointed from Saudi Arabia who leads the prayers, and who leads this, who delivers sermon as well. There is a school existing, beside this mosque, which is teaching both modern, and Islamic Islamic subjects. So, in some kind of religious activity is going on there from Islamic perspective, but and sometimes we also received some contingents from South Africa, South African Muslims coming to preach the people, in Buenos Aires and other parts of Argentina. But I would say that there is a dearth of literature, particularly that kind of literature which conveys the softer image of Islam, which is addressing Islamophobia, particularly existing, in that part of the world. Because people did ask us, whenever we interacted with local people, they had misgivings, misconceptions, about Islam, particularly about the role of women in the society, for instance, the inheritance questions, the status of women in Islam, for example. Polygamy, for instance, was a subject, that was often brought about for discussion. So I think that like this translation, that we have in our hand, from Dr. Musharraf Hussain, there is a need, for having literature written in plain, simple Spanish language, for distribution in Latin American countries, not only in Argentina, but the 5 countries that I used to look after, and I used to travel, often to these countries. There was always a common question. Sorry.
Ayaz, did you travel to Colombia and Mexico and other countries? Did you get okay?
Colombia was not under my jurisdiction.
Okay.
My jurisdiction was restricted to Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, Peru, for instance, and Chile.
All right, okay.
And I had a chance to travel to these societies. And by the way, it would be interesting for you to learn that I managed to persuade our honorary consul in Uruguay, who was a Jew. Now, this is something unthinkable that Pakistani government officials, would be dealing with a Jew, for instance, or appointing a Jew as representative of Pakistan in a particular country, That was something very interesting, but he was very honest with us. He was doing a great job, as far as representing Pakistan was concerned in Uruguay. And an excellent man, very, very successful businessman, and was ready to listen to what I was saying, and he promised that he was going to lay his hand, on one of the translations, of the Holy Quran and read it, and come up, with the objections, that he may have, so that I could probably, refer him to some scholar like Dr. Musharraf Hussain or somebody like that, So, there is a need, for such literature.
Well, let me tell you, Alhamdulillah, we have plan of setting up a Quran society, international Quran society, and we had a plan of actually doing 5 translations into 5 major languages. English, one, of course. Second was Urdu. Third was Spanish. Fourth was Russian, and fifth was French. So Spanish, because we know that the whole of South America and of course Spain itself are Spanish speaking, and there's a lot of need for that. And of course Chinese was the other one. Yes, Chinese as well. So we're hoping, inshallah, make dua. I'm really, and what is unique is I know one of the Spanish Quran translators. So we're actually we've supported him. So so the idea is to do it exactly in this manner, the Urdu one as well with headings. But we want to get scholars. Actually, the idea is to find local scholars who will translate from Arabic into their language. But the only thing that we will do is we want them to section it like this. So it will be proper new translation, hopefully in simple, plain language of their own, plain, simple Urdu, but with these headings, 1,500 headings like this. The introductions will be from my translation, inshallah. So yes, we have that plan. Make dua, Allah accept this intention and plan that we have, and it's doable, to be honest. I have no doubt. It's just a matter of time, and it's not about if. It's going to happen, inshallah, 3 years, 4 years time. But what is really important is I'm now working on the English to make sure that we can spread this out. Our aim was 1 million copies in 5 years, and inshallah, that is my plan in English. 1 million copies in 5 years to distribute, to sell, and to encourage people. And I think we will. We're doing well. I'm hopeful. Allah will. This is our intention. There's 7 billion people. So what is 1 million? Not even 0.01%. So we really got a lot to do, inshallah. So.
Good. Dr. Saab, I just wanted to mention the fact that before you released the Majestic Quran, you had released the small translation copies of Surah Yasin, and I'm just flicking through my bag because, and you had distributed them widely.
We did. We distributed about 50,000 of those.
Yeah, and I have given these to all our young students that we do syllabus with, because we're doing the memorization of Surah Yasin alongside the English. I just wanted to ask that, mashallah, how was the response because before putting the whole translation, how was the response to the Surah Yasin?
This was actually, even before this Yasin, we had another version using a different fonts, different paper, and we got a feedback from that. And then we changed it to this, and somebody sponsored 50,000, mashallah. Which were distributed all over UK. Within about 6 months, we distributed 50,000 of these Surah Yasin. And this one, we got a lot of positive feedback. We got some people saying, there are errors here. This could be improvement. So we took all that on board, mashallah. And that was the whole point. It was a prototype to get feedback. And that helped us to make sure that in the next edition, in the Quran, we would take care of all those points.
And I see you've developed further. So this section about the Washamsu Tajri, in this prototype, it just said the orbits of the sun and the moon, whereas the Quran, then you said the orbits of the sun and the moon and the sailing ships. So you did tweak on the topics as well.
We have, yes, and wording and translation. Yes, we did it's been through very thorough, several. I personally did something like 7 different versions before it went. Even to the printers, at least 7. Alhamdulillah, it was it has to be, it has to be thorough, and I think it's a work in progress. Let's be honest. You can never say this is complete. I hope, inshallah, people like Brother Ayaz will be telling us, there can be better words, better way of expressing things, and we need to do that. I think we need to be humble about our translations. Only Allah's words are so perfect, and its nuances are so amazing. You can't translate those fine nuances of the Quran, the way it expresses its figurative language. It's very rich figurative language, and I couldn't do that in English, to be honest. Let me be honest. We couldn't. You lose a lot of that richness. But then that's okay. At the end of the day, my and your job is to listen to the message of Allah. Listen to what our Lord is saying to us, really.
Good. Before we end the program, inshallah, with a dua by Dr. Musharraf Saab, Ayaz Saab, just finally, I wanted to ask you about Urdu translations in Pakistan. I think the young generation now are perhaps reverting more to English than Urdu. So how do you see the Majestic Quran as a simple translation of the Quran coming out in a place like Pakistan?
Yeah, certainly, yes. Will be a great thing, to do. I don't know if Dr. Saab can find, some good translator, in England, who can do simple translation, as he did, of Majestic Quran. Will certainly be a very, very welcome effort, I should say, because the existing translations, for example, like the Tafhimul Quran, is considered to be one of the simplest translations, of the Holy Quran. and is recommended by many, to the new reader, for instance, in the Urdu language. But if it can be further simplified, and the way Dr. Saab has done it, dividing different ayat, into sections, giving them headings, for easy comprehension, because uh, what what I feel, as a student of the Holy Quran, is that that Quran frequently changes subjects. Once Allah Tabarak wa Taala is talking about the creation of the heaven and the earth, and then suddenly He comes down to to the Quraysh, asking them to refrain from doing idol worship, or focus more on oneness of Allah Tabarak wa Taala and something like that. So for our new generation, which is desirous of reading the Holy Quran in the Urdu language, it would be very handy, for them, if we have the translation of Majestic Quran done, in the Urdu language.
Jazakallah khair. I mean, that's very recurring and refreshing to know.
We sent some copies to Pakistan last Ramadan, and there was a group of young university students actually who were doing Eidkhaf, and they in 10 days they actually read the whole Quran, and they obviously wrote to me how much they enjoyed it. So I've now sent some paperback editions. These are people in Rawalpindi.
Wonderful.
And so it's really amazing, mashallah. People found it easy, and I think the schools like Beacon and some of the root schools and some of the good schools, certainly their students are capable of reading English. For them it's beneficial, but I think for the masses it has to be Urdu. Urdu is the language.
Yes,
inshallah, we are. Yeah. Inshallah, make dua. Allah gives us because I think for the rest of my life I'm a servant of the Quran, and this is my mission now. We are going to be setting up this new Quran society, and I hope inshallah you can help us in Pakistan to do that, Brother Ayaz. I have other friends who are willing to. It's just a matter of now, getting things going, to be honest. And inshallah, I'm very, very confident that we will, be able to do. There are lots of, there's 500 translations in Urdu of Quran.
Yeah,
500. Urdu has so many, and so it's really, it's not that there is a shortage of them. It's really which is appropriate, simple, and also which is contemporary. And also how it's presented. I think the presentation is really important. Translations, on the whole, some are obviously good, others are poor. But those that are good, their presentation is very poor. And I think what we've done in Majestic Quran is what makes it outstanding is the presentation. I think these sectioning, subheadings, identifying the central theme, and the presentation. I think that is what makes it. Yeah, and inshallah, that is what makes it really, and I think we can do that in Urdu as well.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, in my short travels when I went to Pakistan a few years ago, I had a good friend who was a lecturer in Lums University in Lahore. And, I mean, these guys have perhaps better English than, some native Scottish or English people, I mean, mashallah, they're working at a very advanced level in some of these top universities in Pakistan. And I think an English translation of the Quran, something which is simple and relatable, would go far. So I would just like to lastly finish and say, Ayaz Saab, Jazakallah so much for joining us today and taking time out for your incredibly busy schedule. And I know, although you're retired, you're perhaps missing, the whole traveling the world. And well, I mean, COVID-19 unfortunately has restricted all of that. But inshallah, we do dua for your health, and may inshallah that you pass this beautiful experience that you have taken from your travels, just to pass on to people, and people inshallah themselves begin to travel. And very happy to inshallah have you, and inshallah see you again. So Ayaz Saab, over to you to say your thanks, and then Dr. Saab, would you like to finish off with the dua, please?
Yes,
I will. Very much. It was wonderful. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I wanted to share with you the I'm doing a Quran course tomorrow, and I wanted to share with you the and invite you to take part in this. Can you see this screen now of mine?
We cannot see Dr. We can just see your. We can just see you for some reason.
I'm trying to get this. Oh, it's not opening. Anyway, let me just mention it verbally. I'm going to be running this 10 sessions of the Quran course, which is going to be looking at the arrangement of the surahs, the themes and topics of the surah, the organization and structure of surahs, how Allah guides, and effective tips on understanding the Quran. It's really and what makes the Quran very special. So, and also some very basics of the usul al-tafsir and how commentators, what methodologies and approaches they used to understand the Quran, and what we can learn from them. So this is a 10 sessions starting tomorrow. It's going to be every Tuesday and Thursday from 8 till 9:30, starting tomorrow for next 5 weeks on Zoom. But you need to enroll. So if you go on to Majestic Quran, or if you go on to Invitation Publishing, you will be able to register and enroll. It's free of charge. And mashallah, we've got a very amazing response already. So you've still got 24 hours to enroll if you want to join us, inshallah, at 8 o'clock on this Quran course. This is level 1. Level 2 will be looking at usul al-tafsir, and level 3 will be looking at even more higher level of trying to really interpret and understand the Quran in light of what are the aqaid we learn, what are the usul of fiqh we learn from it, and so on. It's a 3-level course. The next one will start in August, and then again in later on, inshallah. So it's I invite you all to take part in that. Thank you very much, Maulana Hassan.
Ayaz, you wanted to say something? Did you want to say anything, or?
No, thank you very much. I just wanted to thank you, and thank Dr. Saab, for having me, in this discussion. It was very enlightening for me, once again, not only reading the Majestic Quran, but also listening directly from Dr. Saab, was a great contribution, to my knowledge. Thank you very much for having me in the show.
Jazakallah. Dr. Saab, do you want to finish off with a short dua for everyone, for us and our families?
اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم وصل عليه. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. اللهم ارحمنا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اغفر لنا يا خير الغافرين. اللهم احفظنا من كل بلاء الدنيا وعذاب الآخرة يا خير الحافظين. Ya Allah, we ask you to protect us all from the pandemic and its ravages. Ya Allah, we ask you to give wisdom to our political leaders so they make the right decisions. And Ya Allah, we ask you to guide humanity. Ya Allah, we ask you to guide our captains of industry to do the right things for our planet. Ya Allah, we ask you to help us to understand your wonderful book. Ya Allah, we ask you to open our hearts. Give us Sharh al-Sadr. Open our minds. Unlock, Ya Allah, our minds. And protect us from bigotry, from racism, from judgmentalism, from stereotyping others, from discriminating against others. Ya Allah, make us people who are empathetic and kind and generous to each other. Ya Allah, we ask you to forgive our sins and our mistakes. Ya Allah, bless us all with the beautiful nur of the Quran. Make it a torch for us. Ya Allah, make it a burhan, a great evidence and proof of our faith, and also, Ya Allah, a source of great proofs of your majesty and of your greatness. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala rasuli khairi khalqihi Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. And just before we finish, just like to tell everyone, many of us, alhamdulillah, memorize Surah Yasin, so it's very important perhaps at least to go over the translation. And like Dr. Musharraf Saab said, his short course that is taking place, if you go on the Majestic Quran website, inshallah, you can enroll. And that's from me, Hassan from Glasgow, and Ayaz Saab from Pakistan, and Dr. Saab from Nottingham. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.